Welcome back. People who suffer loss of a loved one can grieve in a variety of different ways. Sometimes that grief emerges in a way that can cause even more pain in the long run. So the Lutheran Heritage Club wants to kind of jump into the fray and help some folks out. Let's take a look at this video.
Grief Share is a support group ministry that helps people heal from the pain of grief. The Grief Share video seminars, workbook exercises, and small group discussions give participants encouragement, useful advice, and hope.
The Grief Share videos are excellent.
The video strengthened me.
It's a freeing kind of thing to be able to talk about your loss.
My workbook helped me to unravel the feelings I was going through.
If you know people in your church or community who are grieving the death of a loved one, tell them about Grief Share, or visit a Grief Share group yourself to heal from the pain of your grief.
There was such a void until I got into Grief Share.
I never really healed down deep until I came to Grief Share.
Grief Share brought me out of my sadness.
Begin your journey from mourning to joy at Grief Share.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video and hopefully got a lot out of it. From the Lutheran Heritage Club, I want to welcome Paul Finley and Richard Peterson. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Glad to be here.
Why did the church decide to jump into this area?
Well, obviously, we are always in a process of life where we're being born and growing and dying, and particularly our Lutheran faith speaks to the hope of the gospel and giving people healing through the grieving process. So it's one of the most important ministries that we offer, and we're starting a new Grief Share group this week that we want to invite the whole village to participate in so they can find hope.
Is there a right way to grieve? Is there a wrong way to grieve? Should we be thinking of it in those terms?
We shouldn't be thinking of it that way. We shouldn't even think of like stages of grief. There have been books written, and there's lots of people out there that are talking about the stages of grief. And there are stages, but everybody grieves differently. And so everybody has to move ahead at their own pace, and maybe some of us will never truly get over grieving. But we want to emphasize, the Grief Share emphasizes that there's from mourning to joy. There is the possibility of healing from grief. And some people feel grief so deeply that they can't function afterward, after the loss of a loved one or loss of a friend or the loss of a child. And we want to emphasize that there is healing. There is a way out.
And I know there's no right or wrong way to grieve, but there can be an unhealthy way when you slip into, maybe you start to see you're spiraling, and that's where maybe a group like this could really help, right?
Absolutely. Depression is already prevalent in our culture, our society, simply because of loneliness. And many people in the village do live alone, and that was exacerbated during the pandemic. That feeling of isolation can lead to depression. That can lead to self-destructive thoughts. Well, add the loss of a loved one. And Grief Share is for people dealing with any loss, the loss of a spouse, but it might be a child or a dear friend. And it doesn't even have to be a recent loss. Sometimes we are dealing with unprocessed grief from the loss of a parent 10 years ago. And it just, we never healthily dealt with it then, and it's coming to the surface now. So at any time that someone is grieving, they're welcome to come to Grief Share, and this can speak to the hope that we have to combat the depression of loneliness, let alone grief on top of loneliness.
And we're not looking for a cure for grief, and I want to make that clear for you with what you guys are saying. There's no cure. I mean, you know, people who have lost, I've had loss in my life. I look back 10, 20 years on some things, I'm like, I still feel that, but it's still there. I'm still carrying that person and that memory with me. But I'm through the really tough pain of it, and I've made that. That's what we're hoping to get to, maybe the other side of grief, in terms of that person's memory isn't such a trigger anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And why is that important? I mean, like you said, we have to go through it. You can't just work your way around it, or like that unresolved grief.
Well, we think of it as a journey. We think of it as a journey through grief. We must grieve. You probably need to cry. People need to cry. They need to express their emotions. If they don't express it, it just becomes something that gets a hold of us and just becomes kind of like a grudge within us. We've had people in Grief Share who have lost a child many, many years ago. And when they talk about it, you think, well, the child just died yesterday, and the child died 15 years ago, and they have never been able to express their grief, and it's hard. They've never been. Very often, marriages can fail because of that, because people can't express. The husband and wife can't express their grief to one another. So there are many kinds of grief. It's a journey, and there can be joy. There is healing.
Yeah. And my mother lost her mother as a child from cancer. And back in the 50s when this happened, you didn't go to counseling. You didn't go, and so like you say, never processed grief properly.
Yeah.
There's some probably older adults in this very community who, when they lost someone very dear to them younger, never were, you don't go to a psychologist, you don't go to you don't talk about this. We're going to be okay as a family and just move on. And that's that whole thing where it's like, it feels like it just happened yesterday for some people, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a misconception that to heal from grief means that we're not sad anymore. And it's almost like we're dishonoring the memory of the loved one if we don't feel sad that they're gone. That's not the case at all. Healing from grief simply means that we come to peace about our loss, but there's a paradox that you can be both sad and peaceful at the same time. We can still have a sense of missing or longing for the loved one, but in fact, the relationship, the grief is proportional to the depth of the relationship, and we wouldn't grieve if that relationship weren't significant. So the depth of our grief.
We want to get people out to this. It's going to be Tuesdays. I'm sorry about that. No. Tuesdays at the Lutheran Church, 12:30 on Tuesdays through September. We have the information on the screen. People can go to the website as well. There is a booklet that you saw in the video. That is a $20 donation. If you are able to do that, it is free, but a $20 donation would be appreciated. Richard and Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Michael.
When we come back, we're going to take a look at the Friday film. Stay with us.